What's up everyone? Welcome back to my channel. I've missed you all so much. It's been so long since I posted my last video, but I'll fill you guys in towards the end of why I've been MIA. I'm super excited for today's video. We finally completed our floor to ceiling kitchen backsplash. This is basically a step-by-step video of the whole process. If you're not interested in all of that, feel free to skip right to the end to see the results. You will not hurt my feelings. All right guys, let's get into this video. So here we are at Home Depot, hoping to find a tile or stone within our budget. We noticed this porcelain tile before during a previous shopping trip. It wasn't our favorite. I wasn't even sure I liked it at all, but we were determined to modify it and make it our own. But oh, how quickly did we learn that that was a big mistake. I always watch other YouTubers working on home projects that say not to do that. Yes, you can have a budget, but if you have to go a bit over your budget to get the look you want, it's better to do that than settle on something that you won't be happy with. We did look over a few other tiles, but like I said, we were determined to get that stone look at an affordable price. So we picked up a few boxes of tile and some grout in this bone color. Our idea was to use the grout to do that German smear technique, but because it was porcelain and wasn't porous at all like stone, it didn't have the same effect. So we scratched that idea and went back to square one. We then decided to check out Lowe's next. They had a few tiles that I liked. My husband, on the other hand, isn't as open-minded as myself. I love so many different styles, and he was stuck on a certain look. He doesn't like anything shiny. We weren't compromising on anything at Lowe's, so our next stop was Floor and Decor. They had a ton of great options like this stone. It's pretty much the exact look we were going for, but their prices were pretty steep, and we realized at this moment that it wasn't going to work in our kitchen. We just don't have enough space for the larger pieces of stone. At this point, we were getting pretty frustrated, so we circled back to the front and started over just in case we missed anything, which we obviously did because this marble mosaic tile that caught our eye the second time around was in the very first aisle and we walked right by it. We both love the texture and neutral colors throughout the tile, and most importantly, it was within our budget. So we grabbed 7 boxes along with some grout that I will show you a bit later and headed home to get to work. So here's the space we have to work with. We are tiling each wall from floor to ceiling. My husband measured out the dimensions of both walls before our shopping extravaganza, so we knew exactly how many boxes of tile we were going to need. Not sure if you can see it, but the ceiling slants upward from the doorway to that corner on the right, so that's going to be a bit of an issue. You'll see later how that turns out. Here are the tools that we use to place the tile just in case you're interested. Most are pretty self-explanatory. We did have a laser level off to the side, but honestly, we never used it. Once I started putting the tile sheets up on the wall, I felt confident enough that I didn't need it, and then every other sheet I would just use the hand level to check if everything was in line, and it worked out great. Here's a close-up of the marble tile. You can see it has so many neutral colors throughout each piece. I love the warm beigey tiles thrown in. Some of them even have hints of rust or copper, which is one of my favorite things about it. The brand name is Casa Antica. Each box holds 10 sheets of this ocean-honed marble mosaic tile, and we also purchased a 3.5-gallon bucket of Mape ready-to-use premium mortar, which is more than enough to cover both walls. Because this is our first tiling project, we do not own a saw that cuts tile, so rather than buying one or renting one, which you can do, we were so grateful that our friend Walter offered to loan us his tile saw. This thing is ancient, but it's a beast and it got the job done beautifully, so thank you, Walter, for saving us a buttload of money. The first thing that we needed to do was remove the countertop backsplash pieces from each side since we will be bringing the marble tile all the way down to the counter. So for that, you'll just need a heat gun. We use two to get the job done faster, a few shims, a pry bar, and a hammer. First, we let the heat gun sit on the backsplash for about 5 to 10 minutes, then added a bunch of shims behind it to loosen it up, and then all you have to do at that point is just use the pry bar and hammer to slowly separate the backsplash from the wall, and as you can see, it came off pretty easily. Obviously, there's going to be a bit of damage to the wall, which doesn't matter anyway because we are covering it with tile. I had to speed up the footage of us applying the mortar. It's so embarrassing how terrible we are at this. My husband was being so particular that it was causing him to move even slower than he already was. So I grabbed the trowel and tried to do it myself, but I was terrible too. So we ultimately decided that he was in charge of applying the mortar and cutting the tiles, and I was going to place and set all the tiles myself. You'll notice I placed a row of spacers at the bottom along the counter to make sure we left a space for the grout. And then as I set each tile sheet, I would also put a few spacers in between each sheet. These tiles are very forgiving. The edges of the tile are rough and uneven. Some of them are even a little bit thicker than others, so even if you make a few mistakes, no one's going to notice. It's a great tile for beginners or if you're going for a more organic texture. So right here I'm showing you guys that we're going to have to cut a few pieces off of the sheet to make it fit against the door frame, and then we'll just pre-cut a bunch of sheets in that same shape to place going all the way down to the floor trim and then all the way up to the top of the door frame. Before we do all of that, we're going to finish this last row under the cabinet, and then we'll move on to setting all of the sheets that we pre-cut. So because that row of tile ran into the top of the door frame, we're going to have to trim up a few tiles to make sure it lines up. So I'm just marking with my pencil where the cuts need to be, and I'll use that tile as my guide. Yes, my husband is wearing my son's swimming goggles because he was too lazy to go find some safety glasses. So he's just going to cut a few of these tile sheets for me, and I'll go ahead and place them above the doorway. So here is one wall with the tile complete. You will notice we left a bit of a bigger gap for the grout around most of the edges, like the doorway and the corner of the wall. We really didn't want a bunch of thin cut pieces to fill in those gaps. It just kind of worked out that way once we started tiling our way down to the floor and then up to the ceiling. Plus, having to make all of those tiny cuts would have been a nightmare. So we both agreed it was a much better option, and we were happy with the outcome. Before we started on the other wall, my husband wanted to remove the phone jack since we never use it, so he just used one of these wall repair patches and patched it all up. And then we're basically going to go through the same motions. He applies the mortar, and I'll continue to place all of the tile. You'll notice how long it took us to do this project by how many different outfits and nail polish colors I go through. We never really had a full day to work on it. It was like 4 hours here and there. Maybe we would get like 6 to 8 hours on a Sunday, but it felt like it was never going to end. I was tempted to work on it without my husband, but I really didn't want to use the saw since it wasn't ours. I really didn't want to be responsible if something happened to it or if it broke, so yeah, it took forever. I forgot to mention, we did end up using the center of the stove as our starting point for this wall. That's usually the focal point in a kitchen, so it made sense to start there so the tile wasn't off center. Once I finished placing the full tile sheets, I went back and measured the spaces I needed to fill in, had my husband give them a cut, and then I would just coat the back of the tile with mortar and set them in. Here are the full-size and pre-cut tiles I'm going to use for the edge of the wall closest to the stairs. Again, I would just slap the mortar on the back of each piece and place them on the wall. I should also mention that all along this edge of the wall and over along the doorway by the door that leads to the garage, we are going to add caulk in the same grout color instead of using a metal trim, since we were going for a more organic, natural hand-placed finish. Here's the top of the left cabinet all finished. We ended up not going all the way down to the cabinet only because we had so many tiles to work with and we were desperately trying not to have to buy a whole other box just for a few more rows of tile that you couldn't even see anyway. We were so determined to stay within our budget. Here is all the wall space we have left to tile before we can grout. At this point, we were determined to get this thing finished, and then this happened. The one time I told my husband to lay the tiles himself around the outlet while I was placing the tiles on the other side, and now I know never to let my husband lay a single tile ever again. It might be hard to see, but he didn't line them up with all the other tiles surrounding those particular tiles, so that mistake cost us an extra day. Rather than ripping out all the tiles that probably should have been replaced, we ran to Floor and Decor and bought 4 of the larger marble tiles and cut them down to the exact size we needed. So it ended up working out. All is good, and I didn't have to fire my husband. Now that we dealt with that whole fiasco, we can finally move on and finish the tile. Hallelujah, we are now ready to grout. We're going to be using the Mosaic Color Unsanded Grout in white. You're also going to need a few of these large sponges and a float, which you'll see my husband use to apply the grout to the tile in a minute. We then mix the grout in this bucket using a handheld electric mixer, adding a bit of water at a time to get the right consistency, which should resemble a smooth peanut butter. We really had to grout over the tile a few times in so many different directions because of the rough edges and inconsistency in grout lines. We also had those wider gaps to fill in, which my husband ended up using a putty knife to really pack it in so we didn't get any air bubbles. Moving on to the other wall, we got a little bit smarter this time and laid down some heavy-duty paper because grouting can get really messy when you're not a professional. We even covered the carpet on the stairs with saran wrap, which was all my hubby's idea, so he totally redeemed himself. We got this idea from watching a very well-known YouTuber, Lone Fox. I'm sure a lot of you guys watch his channel. When he was grouting his kitchen floor, he used a pastry bag and filled it with the grout for an easier application. Such a good idea, especially for wider grout lines. I'm using my finger to push the grout in at the countertop, which worked amazingly until I noticed there was blood in the grout and realized I had sliced my finger open on one of the tiles, which hurt like hell. But I was so determined to get this project done, I threw on a band-aid and kept going full speed. I don't have a ton of footage of myself cleaning the grout, but this is basically the process. Once you apply the grout, you let it sit for about 30 minutes and then just take your sponge, dip it in water, wring it out pretty good, wipe a small section at a time using both sides of the sponge, then just rinse and repeat until the grout looks to be completely wiped off of the tile. You will end up with a slight haze once it dries, which means you'll have to go back and give it another wipe down until it's nice and clean. The last and final step is the sealer. This will ensure that the tile will not stain if for some reason you splash something on it while you are cooking. We use the 511 Impregnator Sealer, which is pretty standard. I think most people use this brand from what I've seen. And then you're just going to need a foam brush, a foam roller, a pair of gloves, and a paint tray. This stuff comes out like water, so if you decide to use this for your own backsplash, be cautious of that. I use the foam brush to go around all of the edges and outlets and the foam roller to cover the larger areas. It does get a bit foamy and you only need a little bit at a time. A little goes a long way with this stuff. We probably only ended up using about a quarter to a third of the bottle for the entire kitchen. You only have to let the product sit for 5 minutes once it's on the tile, so it's a very quick process. It helped to work in sections to make sure the sealer wasn't sitting for too long. Once that 5 minutes is up, you just take a clean white lint-free towel and wipe off the excess until it appears completely dry. Okay, well, that was the last and final step for me. As for my husband, he still has some caulking to do, so he's going to get to work filling in those edges around the doorway, on the edge of the wall closest to the stairs, and then he'll also caulk along both countertops. And here's the backsplash all completed for just over $700, $706 to be exact. We are very happy with the results. I have to point out that we had planned to cover the hood vent and wrap the island. I'll throw up some ideas that we took from Pinterest, but honestly, we just ran out of time and the video would have been way too long. So we're going to keep that project for its own separate future video. But definitely happy with the results considering it was our very first tile DIY. Also wish it didn't take 3 long years to complete the job, but that's what happens when you can't make a decision and then life just sometimes gets in the way, which is what happened when I started to edit this video. I came down with the worst cough I've had since 2019. It lasted for about 3 weeks. The things that were happening to my body when I would cough uncontrollably, you can just use your imagination. I'm going to keep that part private and save myself from embarrassment. It still isn't totally gone, but I can at least get a sentence out without coughing up a lung. So that definitely put a damper on making videos. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you all that continue to support my channel. It means the world to me. Please hit that like button, consider subscribing if you haven't already, as well as hitting that notification bell. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video, and I'll see you all in the next one.